Ohio State falls to Michigan yesterday, 30-24. Unbelievable environment. I've been to this game 3 years in a row now. I was up there 2 years ago when this little mini run of Michigan started, and I was up there again yesterday and saw it continue. I just really wish you guys could, who haven't been to this game, I wish you could experience it. I have told you many, many times. I grew up in the South. I grew up around the Iron Bowl, which is its own world. But I knew Iron Bowl. I only heard about Michigan, Ohio State. And then I've gotten to experience it and blessed enough to stand on the field every year for the past 3 years for this thing. Just unreal, man. Nothing in the world of sports comes close to when you get to the pinnacle of college football. And this game's the pinnacle of college football. Michigan's the pinnacle of the Big Ten right now. And some of us, I include myself in that, thought we may have a different outcome yesterday, but we did not. What I don't want to do tonight is I don't really want to overthink the room. I have a lot of my colleagues, and all due respect to them, who I've seen take minutes to hours to break this game down. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, well, Michigan outrushed them, 156-107. The team that wins the rushing battle is 22-0 in this game since 0-1. Michigan was plus 2 turnovers. Teams plus 2 or better in turnover margin are 7-0 in this game since 0-7. Michigan, on average, outpunted them 52 yards to 36.7, and I don't have a punting stat for you, but I do want to remind you of this. Remember when the portal went crazy back in the spring, and everyone was talking about the big moves, like DJ Uiagalelei going from Clemson to Oregon State. Wow, that's incredible. Well, it was incredible, and it was a really good move for Oregon State. But I thought to myself, wasn't there something Michigan did? And then I remembered, producer Jesse helped me out on this earlier today. You remember when James Turner transferred from Louisville? Of course you don't. He's a kicker. But we pointed it out, and I mentioned it twice and got chastised a little bit because why are you talking about a kicker? Well, lo and behold, we look at Mr. Turner yesterday, and he goes 3 of 3 on field goal attempts. Ohio State was 1 of 2, and you just add these things up. What did it equal? It equaled another Michigan win. This game always has been and always will be about answering and sustaining. Michigan did both. Ohio State kind of did one yesterday. I was standing there, and Michigan got off to the start and got the turnover and went up 7 because of it. But even when they were up 17-10 to start the third quarter, Ohio State goes on this 12-play, 75-yard drive, touchdown, and after they got across the 50, guys, they went run, 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 run. Kind of like a little microcosm, a little mini version of what Michigan did to close out Penn State. Well, this wasn't to close the game out, but I swear to you, I turned to my left and my right, and I said, they're about to take this game over. And they didn't. And you know why they didn't? Because Michigan did the exact thing this game's about. They answered with a 7-play, 75-yard touchdown drive of their own. And they never gave up the lead. You had, by the way, on that drive, you had a J.J. McCarthy run. His rushing numbers didn't light up the stat sheet. You probably won't have a monster stat game in this sort of game, but he did that. Loveland had a big catch on that drive. That's the drive where they lose the offensive lineman. Pretty gross injury to see on the field. And then right after that place is dead silent. Right after that, Corum rips off touchdown drive or touchdown run, and it's not game over, but as you look back on the game in totality, that's the kind of stuff that decides it. And I always really draw to that sort of thing because sometimes we get these games that are like pinball games, and we look back and so-and-so had 238 yards rushing and so-and-so had 515 yards passing. Well, you're not going to get stat lines like that in this sort of game. The defenses are playing at too high a level, and it's too tight a game. Even if you're playing aggressively, it's a kind of a tight form of aggression. But what you do have is you have these moments, and you have a veteran quarterback finding a way a couple of more times, and you have a first-year starter that is put in a position where he makes mistakes. Not a ton of them, but you got another team that just doesn't make them. Michigan not making mistakes, and Ohio State made a few too many, and Michigan forced them. I don't speak as if they're playing against air. You got an opponent that's putting a lot of pressure on you. I've seen a couple of criticisms in the group text that I have with some of my Ohio State buddies. A lot of them I don't agree with. I'll get to the Ryan Day stuff in a second. You know I'm going to address that. But I think Sharon Moore leading in the interim capacity as head coach here, did a phenomenal job, okay? That goes without saying. And that's been the case since this thing started, Penn State, and then last week on the road at Maryland, and then they get this win. But you know what I do agree with? You know the criticism of Ohio State and the praise and credit of Michigan that I do agree with? Michigan was a more juiced program than Ohio State yesterday. Now, look, some of that's theatrical. I don't mean it about Michigan. I mean, when people say that sometimes, it's theatrical. Remember famously now, because it's like a GIF that floats around. Remember back when I think it was Southern Cal opened against like Alabama or someone, and there's that scene of them coming out of the tunnel, and they're as juiced and as jacked as you could be, and they get body bagged like 52-6. Okay, so some of that stuff's theatrical. I don't mean that. I don't mean the folks that are yelling the loudest. I don't mean whether you're jawing with someone pregame, but I just mean there's a mentality that you have to have. People always tell you in warfare, I am clearly separating the two. Talk to guys who have served before. Guys who have served in active combat situations will tell you, you never really know about a guy. You can go through basic training with him. You never know about a guy until you're either in the foxhole with him or live rounds are flying. Some people go full rat trap. They go into a shell. And others, you see a version of them you couldn't have known existed. Well, in football, again, here's the line, clearly separating combat from sports. But in the highest levels of sports, in a different way, it's the same way. There's this certain mentality. There's this trigger that some people have. And it's not always the loudest dude in the room. It's not always the team that's the most theatrical. But there's a level that you have to get to collectively to be able to play at the level Michigan does. They did it yesterday. I'm not saying Ohio State fell well short. I'm just saying I got some folks, Buckeye friends of mine, criticizing that. And I was around both these teams yesterday. You have to be because there's one tunnel. I kind of felt that. I don't think it's a massive indictment on Ohio State. I think it's a credit to Michigan, but I think there's a lot of validity to that. I also think if you want to tell me, boy, Sharon Moore and that organization with Michigan, they were the aggressor. They kind of took the fight to Ohio State. They felt like they were pushing forward and Ohio State kind of played defensively. I think some of that's overblown, but I think there's some truth to that as well. And those are two things. The reason I bring them up is because those are two things that I've been either seeing or outright being told a majority of the day and last night. I don't think that's the craziest couple of things in the world to say, but you will hear coaches say organizations win championships, the ones especially who win them. They don't ever say, man, this quarterback won us a title. They say organizations win championships, and that's what Harbaugh's built. He's built an organization there. Ryan Day's got a good one as well. It's just that Jim Harbaugh's is better right now. Michigan's is better right now. The entire evidence of that is you can have the leader of said organization, as I've said many times over the past few weeks, forcibly have his hands removed from the wheel. Car keeps right on. That's a rock-solid organization. And back in summer, when we were at Big Ten Media Days, we were around both these teams. I was really impressed with the vibe Ohio State gave off. There's only so much you can learn about a football team when the dudes are wearing suits. I'll grant you that. But there was a vibe. The talk was right. And then Michigan came through at Big Ten Media Days. And I remember talking to some of our colleagues there, and I said, these guys off the record, they keep talking about how they're the best team in the Big Ten. Now it's about winning playoff games. And I got Ohio State folks talking to me about how it's about beating Michigan and getting back to, where we think we're supposed to be. And that juxtaposition kind of struck me because I thought to myself, man, the competitive audacity, the calculated audacity, if you will, the competitive arrogance to look at Ohio State as almost being in your rear view. It's not that we've pulled even with them. We're past them. We respect them as worthy competitors, but we're past them. We got Ohio State back here, and now we're looking out here. How do we win playoff games? How do we win a national championship? And they were valid to think that way, as it turns out. Their program hadn't taken a step back. If anything, it's taken a step forward. So now Michigan's about to go to the Big Ten championship game, where they are favored by over 3 touchdowns against Iowa. And that's the last time you'll ever say something like that because it's the last time the format of the Big Ten championship game will ever be this way. So major all caps congratulations to Michigan and to that entire coaching staff. Now you get Harbaugh back starting this week for the conference championship game. But as much as was made of what Michigan's done, man, dude, the pressure on Ryan Day was immense. You cannot go into these sorts of games and put the stakes on them that we had on this one and not have someone's life be miserable. It's the beautiful thing about sports if you're on the outside of the snow globe. If you're on the inside of it and you end up on the wrong end of it, it's a lot of money. I know it's a lot of money. I know that. I've always, anytime someone tells me, oh man, I'd be miserable, I'd work all those hours for that kind of money, I don't doubt you would. You're probably not qualified to, but if someone offered you, what does Day make, $7 or $8 million? I don't know. It makes a lot of money. Let's just say 8. If someone offered you $8, $9 million a year, I know you'd sign the piece of paper. The whole point in the way that competitors are wired, high-level competitors, is that's not the motivation to begin with. And I don't mean they don't love making the money. Certainly they love making the money. But it's not what drives a lot of them. And therefore, all I'm telling you is he can make $9 million or $9 billion a year. If you're a competitor and your wiring is of that nature, there is no amount of money you can make that eases the sting of, I just lost to Michigan 3 straight years, and you can't do that as the head coach here. No amount of it, okay? So the reason I say that is because that same group text included a lot of folks either saying one of two things. He makes this many millions of dollars a year, so this is unacceptable, or he makes this many millions of dollars a year, so I don't feel sorry for him. Well, no one's asking you to feel sorry for him, me included. But all I'm saying is there was a third component to it, and that is he makes this many millions of dollars a year, so it sucks for me a lot more than it does for him because I'm just a fan working a 9-to-5 job. You may be a fan working a 9-to-5 job. I got all the respect in the world for you. It doesn't suck worse for you than it does for him. Promise you. I wish that I could have a psychological profile, not just on Ryan Day, on any of these coaches. You can do it with Kirby, you can do it with Saban, you can do it with any of these guys. If Sark were to lose this Saturday, I think that's when the Big 12 championship game is, I wish you could do a psychological profile in the moment and realize how little they care about their salary in the moment. It's nice to have the money, but man, for high-level competitors, this is everything. The real currency is winning, and when you don't do it, it just doesn't matter. You're too miserable to spend your money anyway. So moving forward, there's going to be an unhealthy conversation around Ryan Day. A blind man could have seen that coming. He is 56-7 as a head coach, but and I'm going to say it before everyone else says it, he's 1-3 versus Michigan. He's 1-3 in the college football playoff. The other loss came against Oregon randomly a few years ago. He's something like 40 or 41-0 versus the rest of the teams. And an Ohio State fan will tell you readily and accurately, we should win the rest of those games. You're going to be judged on a few games per year here, most notably this one. And if you don't win it, we'll move on. I'll give you my personal opinion on it. My personal opinion is I love the value that's placed on this game. I love the importance of it. I love the magnitude that it carries. It is what's beautiful about regular season college football in a pre-expanded playoff era. It's what I've grown up with. I love the maximization of importance on Saturdays in the fall. Where I do think people get it wrong sometimes, humbly, is I think far too much finality is placed on the result of this one game, and I think far too much value is placed on the result of this one game as it relates to how good a coach is. But at the same time, I understand. I think Ryan Day coached a good enough game yesterday, for example. I think offensively, I had a couple of coaches texting me saying, it's pretty impressive what they did offensively, given the limitations of quarterback yesterday. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but I think they coached a good enough game to win yesterday. They turned the ball over twice. Michigan didn't. That's kind of the way it works. I don't watch them lose the game for the third time in a row and make these holistic, overarching, definitive conclusions about the guy. Whereas if the turnover margin would have been inverted, you'd be saying, good for him for hiring Jim Knowles a couple of years ago. Hey, good for Ohio State for matching the physicality at the line of scrimmage. Hey, good for Ohio State for this, for that. It's like the same game plays out. You change one little stat column, and it doesn't make the person any different. And so The one thing I'm curious about is, does he feel that wholesale changes are needed? I doubt he does. I do think that what's interesting is, what is a Ryan Day team? And I ask the question because this Ryan Day team looks different than what a Ryan Day team did 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, inevitably they were going to have a Heisman caliber quarterback pulling the trigger, but they weren't anything special defensively. Well, now they are, because a Ryan Day program decided they needed to be, and they made the move. Well, what is a Ryan Day team 2 years from now, 4 years from now, if he's there 10 years from now? That's what fascinates me, because I don't know the answer, because I don't think the dude's done evolving as a head coach. This one will sting. It should. You can't be losing 3 games in a row to Michigan if you're the head coach at Ohio State. He gets that. Everybody, I think, gets that. But at the same time, to go back to the group text again, because I thought it was a perfect case study for doing the segment tonight, I'll ask them, and I'll ask you guys the same question. The ones who actually think you need to move on from this guy, where are you going? Now, I don't think serious-minded people, in the Woody Hayes facility up there think that way, but if you do, where would you go? I want you to also just consider something. I'm going to talk about this later in the A&M segment. The Grand Slam hire in college football is largely an illusion. Bama pulled it off a generation ago with Nick Saban. Elsewhere, where are the Grand Slam hires? And what I mean is the championship caliber coach already established as such, and then importing him into your program. Where does that happen? So what I'm trying to tell you is it doesn't. You think in your mind it does, because you think, what about Dabo at Clemson? That dude wasn't anything before they elevated him and took a chance on him. And you can say the same thing about Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. You can say it about Day at Ohio State. You said it about Kirby at Georgia. Even if you were to get rid of him, your best case scenario is you're taking another risk. The Ryan Day risk has been a lot more reward than downside, but the downside's magnified, and I get it. I just think there's a lot further you could fall than you could climb right now. Michigan could very well win the national championship, though. And I haven't said that the last 2 years. This team could win the national championship. There are limitations offensively, but they are a complementary team. They're a player-led team. And you saw when the offensive lineman went down yesterday, it wasn't like taking a brick out of the wall. It was like scooping a cup of water out of a lake. The rest of the water just filled in. That's the difference. And trust me, there's a big one. Some teams are player-reliant, and Michigan has an organization. It didn't happen overnight either, but they got an organization.